Welcome to HUD's Housing Choice Voucher Overviews. This video will discuss the Financial Management Center funding communications to help PHAs identify and understand common funding communications. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, commonly known as HUD, distributes funding to local public housing authorities, or PHAs, to administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program. PHAs receive information on the HCV program from the Financial Management Center, or the FMC. The FMC sends out the funding notices and other communications directly to PHAs. The purpose of this training is to identify and understand common communications from the FMC. FMC notices are published using common naming convention. Recognizing the purpose of the funding, the subject line description, and the naming convention of the file attachments will assist in identifying the intent of each communication. Files are named with the following convention: PHA code, _ group, _ date formatted, 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit date, _ description, _ PSD tag .pdf. The PHA code refers to the local PHA to whom the notice applies. Group refers to the type of notice. Each notice has a designated 3-letter code. The format of the date the notice is published indicates year, month, and day. Description will be a brief description of the notice, no more than 20 characters. PSD tag is used for any letters generated programmatically. This could be a memo number or other descriptors associated with the letter. Now let's take a look at common types of communication notices that the FMC may issue. The Annual Contributions Contract, ACC, is written contract between HUD and a PHA. The ACC provides the authorization of budget authority to the PHA. Under the ACC, HUD agrees to obligate funds to the PHA over a specified term to be used for housing assistance payments and for administrative fees to fund program operations. The ACC details the terms and conditions that the PHA is required to follow. This is the initial contract between HUD and the PHA. A new ACC will only be produced if a PHA's name is changed or if a new program is established. An initial contract is amended by HUD each time funding is obligated to your PHA. Each new increment of funding constitutes a separate Consolidated Annual Contributions Contract, also known as the Consolidated ACC or CACC. With the implementation of the CACC, a notice to amend the original ACC is replaced with a single amendment and funding exhibit. The CACC consists of the cover letter, amendment to the contract, and a funding exhibit. Specific details included in the CACC will be the funding increment amount, effective and expiration dates, term, and units if applicable. The CACC letter will follow the POB letter, which will be discussed later in this presentation. A CACC letter can include one or more months of renewal funding. A CACC is also sent when new or non-renewal funding is obligated to the PHA. The Administrative Fee Reconciliation AFR letter and enclosure is used to advise a PHA of the calculation of earned administrative fees for the month specified. These notices include a cover letter explaining how the reconciliation is determined and an additional enclosure providing the calculation of the earned fees. The appropriation law enacted each year specifies how administrative fees will be calculated. Typically, they're based on PHA leasing as reported and validated from the Voucher Management System, VMS, database at a specific point in time. AFR notices are typically sent several months after the completion of the quarter. This is due to the timing of reporting HAP expenses and leasing to VMS, along with the time required to validate VMS reporting once it's been submitted. The Disaster Assistance Funding (DAF) notice is sent to PHAs who are receiving Disaster Housing Assistance Program (DHAP) funding. DHAP provides a monthly rent subsidy to assist eligible families displaced by natural disasters in a joint activity with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. DAF notices are only sent to PHAs authorized disaster funding as declared by the President and authorized by HUD. The HCV Program Housing Assistance Payments Disbursements Notice, FND, provides the PHA with monthly updates on program disbursements and applicable cash management procedures. The notices are provided for all program types, including HAP, AF, Mainstream, MS, Emergency Housing Vouchers, EHV, and more. These notices include a cover letter explaining how the disbursements were determined and how cash management principles were applied. An additional enclosure provides calculation of the planned disbursement. This is the amount that will be deposited into a PHA's HCV account and should immediately be compared to the PHA's funding need. If the scheduled disbursement will not support the PHA's need for HAP funds, the PHA should reach out to their FMC financial analyst to request a HUD-held reserve, HHR disbursement. FND notices are received monthly prior to disbursements being deposited into a PHA's bank account. Sometimes the general funding notice will include several months as allowed by available funding appropriation and budget authority available. The Housing Assistance Payments, or HAP, Reserve Reconciliation, HRR Notice, provides the results of the semi-annual and final calendar year HAP reconciliation. The reconciliation is the comparison of funds dispersed to the PHA with program expenses reported in VMS for the applicable months. Separate reconciliations are received for the HAP, MS, and EHV programs. HRR notices are received semi-annually. The HRR covering January through June is typically received in September, and the final HRR for the whole calendar year is typically received in April of the following year. The Intent to Disperse IND letter is a notification of monthly disbursements scheduled for specific program funding. When a new monthly disbursement has been calculated, the IND notice is updated with a current disbursement schedule reflecting the monthly program, HAP, and/or AF amounts. The schedule will reflect at least 12 months of payments dating back from the current notice. For example, it might reflect disbursements made from April 2021 to April 2022. The letter will also reflect any scheduled payments for future months. This notice is sent out as program payments are determined for any of the programs administered by the PHA. If a new payment is not being scheduled, updated, no notices will be sent. The Miscellaneous MSC notice can be used for various program announcements sent on a non-recurring basis. MSC notices don't fall under a specific recurring basis or program and are not sent to all PHAs. Some examples of miscellaneous funding notices could be set-aside awards, notice of funding announcements, NOFA awards, BASH invitation to apply, and more. These notices can be sent at any time throughout the year. The Point of Obligation Letter, or POB, is the initial notification that funds will be obligated or made available to a PHA to support a specific program. The POB is a commitment of budget authority allocated to the PHA. The POB notice will include Point of Obligation Letter in the subject line. The letter will also include information on the program funding being issued, e.g. HAP, VO, Mainstream, DV, administrative fees, AF, etc., as well as the budget authority assigned and the purpose of the funding. The letter notes that the additional details will be included in the follow-on notice to amend the Consolidated Annual Contributions Contract, CACC. The POB is the first notice to the PHA when additional funding will be obligated. Obligations occur when Housing Choice Voucher (HCV) renewal funding is received. Additionally, any type of non-renewal funding being awarded to the PHA, such as Tenant Protection Voucher (TPV) or Special Purpose Voucher (SPV) awards, will begin with the POB letter being sent to the Executive Director. The Recapture RCT letter provides a PHA with the Notice of Recapture of Excess Section 8 program reserves for the moderate rehabilitation and single-room occupancy programs. Public Law 105-18, enacted into law on June 12, 1997, requires the Headquarters Financial Management Division to complete an assessment and to recapture excess Section 8 program reserves on an annual basis. The recaptured amount is adjusted from the PHA's ACC program reserve balance by the amounts included in the notice. This action typically takes place in August of each calendar year. The Restricted Net Position (RMP) notice is sent to PHAs who meet the parameters of variance between the HUD calculated and VMS reported restricted net position. These PHAs are required to participate in a reconciliation of the RNP to be used for future calendar year HAP reconciliation and any additional disbursement request made for HAP funds. PHAs who participate in the RNP reconciliation will receive several documents used to perform the reconciliation and concurrence of the agreed-upon RNP amount. There are typically 5 documents sent to the PHAs: the Introduction Cover Letter, RNP Workbook Instructions, RNP Workbook, Certification, and Acknowledgement. The evaluation of RNP variances takes place after the annual HAP reconciliation is completed. The notice is typically sent to PHAs in early August and can be utilized by FMC financial analysts to assist PHAs in resolving any identified RNP variances. The Calendar Year Renewal Funding RNW letter and enclosure is to advise a PHA of the Housing Assistance Payments HAP renewal funding allocations for the HCV program each calendar year. The funding allocations are based on the requirements of the Annual Consolidated Appropriations Act enacted each year by Congress. Total prorated renewal funding is the amount of funds that will be obligated to the PHA for the calendar year based on the data and calculations provided in the accompanying enclosure. Obligated funds are available to be dispersed to the PHA as needed based on calculation of monthly needs and PHA documented request for additional disbursements. Funds obligated but not dispersed are held for the PHA by HUD. The estimated HAP obligations provided to PHAs prior to the renewal notice will be reconciled in the enclosure, and additional excess obligations will be adjusted accordingly. HUD has 60 days after the implementation of the Appropriations Act to publish the renewal funding allocation notices to PHAs. A PIH notice describing the Annual Appropriations Act funding implementation for the HCV program in detail is published and presented by Headquarters Financial Management Division, FMD, every year. This notice is a very important tool for the PHA's program execution and funding decisions for the year. The notice is published on HUD.gov. The Workload WKL notification is sent to PHAs and HUD field offices to identify a change in the Financial Management Center's financial analyst. Each time a personnel or workload change occurs, your PHA and the field office is notified to ensure you are aware of the established point of contact to facilitate HCV program and funding actions. These notices are published whenever a workload change is made, typically due to retirement, new hiring, or any other personnel action. This concludes the overview presentation on HUD's HCV Program Financial Management Center Communications. To learn more about the HCV program, please visit www.hud.gov/HCV.